There are days when the world presses so closely against the mind that even silence feels crowded. Days when we try to be calm, to be good, to be present. Yet our thoughts scatter like birds, startled by the slightest sound. And in moments like these, we sometimes forget that devotion, discipline, mindfulness are not merely in the gestures we perform, but in the quiet honesty within them. It is in this modern restlessness, in the rush of conversations, obligations, and wandering thoughts that stories from old monasteries still breathe. They remind us gently that struggle with attention is not new, that distraction is not a problem of the digital age alone. Human minds have always wandered, always slipped into the familiar warmth of everyday talk, even in places meant for devotion. On a Sabbath day in Middle Burma, the Thigazar Sadao arrived in the town of Pianmana. People gathered by the hundreds, eager and respectful, their hearts lifted by the occasion. They came with earnest faces and hopeful spirits, ready to receive the 8 precepts from his hand. Yet beneath their devotion, there was the unmistakable air of a holiday, the lightness of a break from routine, the excitement of gathering with familiar faces. The Sayadaw saw this, and with a soft firmness, he reminded them, "If you choose the Sabbath, then wear it with dignity. If you step into silence, then honor the silence." Meditation, prayer, contemplation. These were not decorations of the day, but the heart of it. To guide them, he told a story, a simple one, a quiet one, a story about a little novice and the unexpected lesson he brought. And so the tale begins. It was a full moon day, bright and still, when the women of a small Burmese village made their way to the monastery. Their footsteps were soft but purposeful as they carried alms food. With devotion shining plainly in their movements, they offered the food to the abbot with the reverence of long practice, accepted the 8 precepts, and then drifted outward to sit beneath the cool shade of mango and tamarind trees in the monastery courtyard. Inside, the abbot and the monks gathered in steady rhythm, their voices rising and falling as they recited the scriptures. But for the youngest novice, the day was unusually empty. On a Sabbath, there were no lessons, no chanting to join, no task to keep his hands busy. So he walked quietly across the courtyard, a small figure wandering in the gentle warmth of the afternoon. His eyes moved lazily across the scene until they paused on the women beneath the trees, curious. He watched them from a short distance. Instead of the stillness he expected, beads moving between fingers, whispered prayers, steady breaths in meditation. He noticed their lips moving, first slowly, then more animatedly. Perhaps, he thought, they were discussing something noble, something moral, or spiritual, drawn by the hope of wisdom. He stepped closer and listened. But what reached his ears was different. Oil prices, profits, gold bangles, standards of gold. A daughter who had eloped with an apprentice. The boy blinked, puzzled. He listened more closely. The circle of conversation drifted easily, as conversations often do, from family matters to quarrels, from marriages to property disputes, from lawsuits to land prices, from gold to oil, and then back to oil again. The afternoon sun moved slowly across the sky as the words flowed endlessly, and the young novice, silent and observant, took it all in. As the long afternoon softened into evening, the sky changed gently above the monastery courtyard. The golden light thinned. The shadows stretched across the earth, and the women's conversation, flowing from topic to topic, like a restless stream, finally began to slow. By then, the young novice had heard everything. Not in judgment, not in anger, but in the quiet astonishment of a child who had expected. Solemn practice found instead the familiar hum of worldly talk. When the first hint of dusk touched the treetops, the women gathered their baskets, their shawls, and the little items they had brought along. They rose with contentment on their faces. not from meditation, not from prayer, but from the pleasure of a long, soothing conversation among familiar friends. As they stepped toward the monastery gate, the novice walked ahead of them and climbed onto the gate post. He sat there lightly, small legs dangling, watching them approach. The courtyard had grown calm. The scriptures inside had faded into evening silence. Only the last glow of the day remained. When the women reached the gate, they smiled at the boy, pleased with themselves, pleased with the Sabbath they believed they had kept. With cheerful voices they said, "We have spent a good day, for we have kept the Sabbath. So, little novice, accept a share of our merit." The novice looked at them. These women who had spoken for hours of profits, jewelry, quarrels, land, and daughters. He looked at them with the simple clarity of one who had no filter between observation and response. And instead of the polite blessing they expected, he opened his mouth and cried out, "Boo-boo-woo-woo." The sound echoed strangely in the dusk, sharp and unexpected. The women froze, their smiles falling away. What they heard felt like mockery. What they felt was insult. Without a word, they turned around and hurried back toward the abbot. The women stormed into the monastery hall, their steps firm, their voices rising with wounded pride. The abbot, taken aback by the sudden commotion, looked up from his evening calm. They bowed quickly, but their faces were tight with offense. "Venerable sir," they said, "the little novice has mocked us. He shouted rude sounds at us as we were leaving. We asked that he be punished." The abbot's expression hardened. A teacher's disappointment can be stern, and his duty toward discipline was not small. He rose at once, seized a cane, and called the novice to stand before him. The boy came quickly, not defiant, not fearful, simply present, as though he had nothing to hide. "Why did you behave so rudely?" the abbot demanded. The novice bowed. His voice was small, but steady. "My lord." "They were not really keeping the Sabbath," he said softly. "They were discussing many matters." And with that he began to repeat, word for word in perfect order, every fragment of the afternoon's conversation. Oil prices, profits, goldsmiths, elopements, family quarrels, lawsuits, land, gold, and back again to oil. Each sentence unfolded from the boy's memory with clear, unbroken precision. The abbot's anger slowly dissolved into disbelief. His mouth fell open, his grip on the cane loosened until it slipped from his fingers and struck the floor. When the novice finally finished, the hall was silent. A silence deeper than the one the women had failed to keep. The abbot looked at the women, then back at the boy, then at the women again, and with a long, exhausted sigh, he lifted his voice and cried out, "Boo-boo-woo-woo." The same sound, the same meaning, an echo of truth. The cry left the abbot's lips with a weight far deeper than the novice's playful burst. It was not anger, not ridicule. It was the sigh of a teacher who suddenly saw the whole picture at once, the intention behind the day, the expectations set upon the Sabbath, and the wandering minds that had slipped away without even noticing. The women, startled by the echo of their own rebuke, stood still. Their earlier confidence faltered. The abbot was not a man who reacted without thought. His voice, though brief and strange, carried something unmistakable, recognition. The little novice stepped back quietly, not triumphant, not proud, simply relieved that the truth had been spoken aloud. His heart beat in the soft rhythm of a child who had acted simply because it felt right and honest. The women looked at one another, their faces shifting from offense to confusion, and finally to something gentler, perhaps embarrassment, perhaps understanding. In that quiet hall, with the evening shadows gathering around them, the noise of their afternoon conversation suddenly seemed distant, almost fragile. Nothing more was said. Nothing more was needed. The abbot let the moment settle like dust drifting slowly to the floor. A lesson had revealed itself without force. A mirror had been held up without accusation. In the stillness that followed, the truth lay open, calm and bare. As the night deepened, the women stepped outside the monastery hall. Their steps were slower now. Their voices hushed. The full moon above them seemed brighter than before, casting soft light across the courtyard. They had spent the afternoon. The novice remained near the doorway, small and silent, watching them go, not with judgment, only with the clear-eyed innocence of someone who had expected stillness and found something else. The abbot stood behind him, hands folded, no cane in sight. His breath was steady, his gaze softened by reflection. For all his wisdom, even he had been caught off guard by how easily devotion could slip into distraction, how quickly the mind could wander while the body sat in a sacred place. It was a quiet reminder. Keeping a Sabbath was more than presence, more than ritual, more than showing up beneath tamarind and mango trees. It was the inner turning, the gentle choosing of silence, awareness, and sincerity. And in that simple, unexpected way, the little novice had brought everyone back to what they had forgotten. No further scolding took place. No punishment was given. Only a shared stillness remained, as the moon shone over the monastery, holding the lesson in its light. If this story settled somewhere within you, in the quiet part of the heart that longs for sincerity, for mindfulness, for the kind of silence that keeps you honest, you are welcome to stay close. Let this be a place you return to when the world becomes loud, when your thoughts wander, or when you simply want stories that gently guide you back to yourself. If the lesson of this tale touched you, you may subscribe to walk with us through more moments of calm. You may like the video if it helped you breathe a little slower, and share it if you feel it might remind someone else to keep their own inner Sabbath with sincerity. And if something in the story stayed with you, leave a comment, not as noise, but as another quiet voice in this small circle of reflection. Here we learn. Here we listen gently. Here every story is a soft step towards stillness,